Okay, well, in the interest of time, I think we will get our meeting started for this afternoon. Thanks for everyone joining this call today, and welcome to our monthly Produce Safety Educators webinar. I was just glancing through the list of attendees here, and I do recognize some familiar names and also some new ones, so that's really exciting. Because today we're going to be talking about becoming a PSA Lead Trainer, how to build your foundation for training success. So I suspect a few of you may be interested in becoming lead trainers or working with other people who want to become lead trainers. So we're going to have some tips and tricks, and we're going to have a fantastic panel discussion at the end of today's call. So I hope you'll stick around to the very end. If you want to just go forward one slide, Donna. Before we get started, you all are in this meeting room. You're going to be muted. We will have some time for questions and discussions at the end of this meeting. I also forgot to mention that this particular meeting is a collaboration between the Produce Safety Alliance and the National Farmers Union Local Food Safety Collaborative. And NFU has very graciously arranged for captions to be available for this particular meeting. So you can turn on and off the captions by clicking the live transcript on the controls bar at the bottom of the screen. If you'd rather access that in a separate window, you can also access that through the URL, which is on the screen and will be in the chat box. It's the streamtext.net link as well, just in case you want an extra resource and you prefer to see that live transcript going on. But we are recording this session, and it will be available on our website after the call as usual. We'll usually send out a wrap-up email with any resources that we talked about today, and the recording, as well as the PowerPoint presentation, which we'll have based on our website. Next slide, Donna. Before we get into the presentation today, we wanted to give you a few key updates, because some of these updates you could impact future Train the Trainer courses. If those of you who are on this call have not attended a Train the Trainer course yet, we, as of October 1st, we will be instilling a new policy that you will need to attend a PSA grower training prior to attending a PSA Train the Trainer course as a prerequisite. Again, that will not begin until October 1st. So you will need to attend a grower training before you can attend the Train the Trainer curriculum. And that really came about because we've had discussions within our training team and with other trainers of trainers. And we really feel that it's important that you as trainers and potentially future lead trainers really understand that curriculum content. And during a Train the Trainer course, we do not cover that material in great depth like we would in a grower train course. Really, the Train the Trainer course is teaching you about the curriculum broadly and about tools that you can use to teach the curriculum, but we don't cover every single bullet point. So we feel it is important that trainers attend a grower training prior to attending the Train the Trainer course. And when you do register for a future Train the Trainer course, you will be asked a question that says, have you attended a grower training course? And if you haven't, we won't be able to enroll you in that course until you have completed that prerequisite requirement. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that policy change going forward. And then the other really important one to you as trainers, especially if you're planning to host remote delivery trainings, is that we have extended that policy through March 31st of 2022. So you can continue to host your remote delivery trainings until March 31st of 2022. Next slide, Donna. The other big news is that we are hiring. One particularly sad thing is that Connie Fisk is no longer with our team, but she has moved on to a fantastic job at the Washington State Department of Agriculture. She's wrapping up a few more projects with us. We're very sad to see her go. I see she is logged into this meeting today. So if you have worked with Connie, please do share your congratulations in her new position, but we will be rehiring Connie's position for the Northwest Regional Extension Associate. The link has been dropped in the chat box to that job. We will start reviewing applications starting at the end of this week, likely next week as they come in, until we find a suitable candidate. to fill Connie's shoes. And then I think this is the last update before we get into the content of this particular meeting, is that we have another exciting series. If some of you have attended our English language trainer refresher series, we are going to do the same, except it will be delivered in Spanish. And on our team, Davis and Ricardo will be delivering that series. It will start on July 7th. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We will send out more information through this listserv, through our general listserv, and then it'll also be posted on our English website and on our Spanish website. All of the links for that particular meeting. It will be similar to the English refresher series, where the trainers, Davis and Ricardo, will give a presentation, basically a high-level refresher of the Train the Trainer course. And then that part will be recorded. They'll turn off the recording, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and discussions. The prior English series was recorded, and the Spanish will be recorded and available as well. Attending this refresher series is not the same as attending a Train the Trainer course. So it won't result in you getting a Train the Trainer certificate. It will only result in providing you a bit of a refresher, since you have attended the Train the Trainer series in Spanish language. So we're really excited for that to kick off starting July 7th. Keep an eye out for more information on our website and through our listservs. And then I was wrong. There is one more announcement. We won't be hosting a call in July. This summer is always a very busy time. I know for many of you who are doing field work, like Elisabeth was just mentioning, she just came in from the field and working with growers. So we're not going to have a call this July. Our next call will be held on August 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern. The focus of that is going to be on managing food safety risk while using soil amendments, and overview of new resources, and that will be with Donna. And you can find the Zoom link with a registration that will be shared shortly and posted on our website. So definitely do a save the date for the 16th, and we will send out that registration information as soon as it's available. All right, now getting to the good stuff. Why you all joined this meeting today: to learn more about the PSA Lead Trainer role. We're going to give a very brief overview of the lead trainer application process, but we really aren't going to go into a ton of detail, because there are a bunch of resources that we will share in the chat box, and then we'll also have those linked in the wrap-up email that we send out to help you prepare to become a lead trainer. We'll also have a panel discussion. We'll do some introductions in a few minutes after Donna and I have a chance to just give a high-level overview of the whole process. But they'll talk more about their tips for training success and becoming a lead trainer and hosting PSA courses as a lead trainer. So we're hoping that giving you a snapshot of the process, refreshing your memory if you have attended our Train the Trainer course, which is a prerequisite to become a lead trainer, that will refresh your memory, and then we'll also give some of those resources to help you prepare. Ultimately, PSA lead trainers are responsible for making sure that that content is going to be delivered accurately in a PSA grower training course. But a lead trainer is someone who has attended a PSA Train the Trainer course and then completed the PSA lead trainer application process, which we will talk about in a few minutes. At least one PSA lead trainer is required at every PSA grower training. And we really feel strongly that there is at least one PSA lead trainer at every grower training, because you can attend the trainer course. Anybody can attend the Train the Trainer course. And there's no vetting process to get into those courses. So we want to make sure that lead trainers can meet all four of the competency areas that we've determined are really key for delivering the grower training. Lead trainers are also extremely important, because if you're not prepared as a trainer, you can confuse growers, misinform growers, cause them to make decisions on their farm that have financial impacts. or implement incorrect practices, which could result in them not complying with a regulation or not meeting their audit standards if they are doing a third-party audit. So it's really important that we are prepared and we are giving them accurate content delivered in a very high quality, effective training. And that process really enables us at the PSA to have some level of quality control over our courses, knowing that those individuals have demonstrated to us that they have this knowledge and that they have this experience to make those courses run effectively. You're probably asking yourself, what are those 4 competency areas? If you don't recall from your PSA trainer manual, there are 4 of them. And these really originated back in 2013. We held a meeting with a bunch of collaborators from all over the country who had experience delivering good agricultural practices training. And now we were looking to gear up for the produce safety rule to come out and to be doing education and roll out the PSA grower trainings. So we gathered together these individuals and we talked about, what do we think are the key things that a lead trainer would need in order to effectively host a training? First of all, when you think about the grower training content, there's a lot of scientific knowledge and experience that's required to deliver those slides. When you think about Module 1, where a lot of that content is first introduced, things like microbiology, talking about viruses, parasites, bacteria. Module 5.1, which is agricultural water, we really get into some scientific concepts there with the die-off of pathogens and agricultural water testing. So it's really important that you have that produce safety science knowledge and experience. The second is in fruit and vegetable production knowledge. You have to understand how a farm works and how a farm functions in order to understand how these requirements in the rule are going to affect those growers and help to identify potential risks on the farm. So if you don't know what the realities of farming are, it may be very difficult for you as a trainer or an extension professional or consultant to help a grower identify what risks might be on their farms if you don't understand what the practices actually are. The third competency area is effective training delivery, which is fairly self-explanatory, but making sure that you can host a training, you know what sort of key concepts for adult education are required, making participants comfortable, managing all of the paperwork aspects. There's a lot of different components that roll into an effective training delivery beyond just the curriculum content. And then the last one, and probably one of the most important ones, is the fact that this curriculum is focused on the FSMA produce safety rule. So we want you as a lead trainer to have that knowledge of the FSMA produce safety rule. We recognize that you're not going to be able to, potentially not going to be able to recite individual requirements out of the rule unless you've really studied, but we want to make sure that you're familiar and know how to use the resources, know how to answer questions, and know how to say, I don't know, but I'll follow up on that particular issue. There is a lot within the regulation to understand, but at least having that ability to navigate documents like draft guidance, the preamble to the produce safety rule, the produce safety rule itself, and then any updates that may be coming out from FDA regarding enforcement discretion or timelines changing for compliance dates, those sort of things are really captured under that section of FSMA produce safety rule knowledge. The application that you will fill out to become a lead trainer is really a question from each one of those categories. And when you fill out that application, which Donna is going to talk about in a little more detail here shortly, it's important to keep in mind which competency area it is coming from, because we want your response to demonstrate your knowledge in that particular area. So at the top of the application, you'll actually see the competency area. It will say, you know, this question is about effective training delivery. So we want you to focus your response as if you're talking to a grower on that particular competency area topic. Next slide, please. Your responsibility as a lead trainer is definitely to ensure that the curriculum content is delivered accurately by not just you, but all of the other trainers who may be participating in your training for growers. and making sure that participants get their questions answered accurately, or at least resources provided to them that can help lead them to an answer. There's also additional responsibilities that are more going back to that training delivery role, making sure that all the paperwork is filled out, all the evaluations come back, making sure that the payment for the certificates comes in a timely manner. And also making sure that every one of those training modules from 1 all the way up to module 7 are delivered in the grower training course. So you really are the overseer to make sure this whole course flows fluidly and that all of the policies are followed. This also applies to any other lead trainers in your course. So you all as lead trainers, let's say you have a grower training and you have 2, maybe 3 lead trainers if you wish. Minimum is 1 lead trainer, but let's say you have 3 lead trainers. All 3 of those PSA lead trainers are required to follow the policies and are responsible for following those policies. So if there's an issue with the course, there's potential consequences for all of the lead trainers registered to that course, not just 1. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware. This sometimes comes up when an individual is working with another organization, such as a fruit and vegetable organization, to host a training. They may be managing things like the registration or payment of certificates, and that's great. You're more than welcome to work with other entities to make sure this happens effectively, but just know that you as a lead trainer have to make sure that all those things are done, even if someone else is paying for the certificates or someone else is helping you with the paperwork. And this, oh, sorry, Donna, go ahead. I couldn't see what the next slide was, but I just want to pass it off to Donna because now she's going to go through the lead trainer process and talk more about some tips once you're actually into the application itself.
Excellent. Thank you, Gretchen. So as Gretchen mentioned, in the next few slides, I am going to go through a brief overview of the lead trainer process, and I'm going to really try to point you to some of the resources that we have up on our website to help give some additional suggestions on the types of things you can include in your lead trainer application. So to start off with the lead trainer process, I wanted to take you through this flow diagram. This is a resource that is up on the website under trainer information. And the first thing I want to highlight is a reminder that in order to become a lead trainer, the participant or the prospective trainer needs to attend a PSA grower training course. And this is the new policy that Gretchen outlined. This is going to be as of October 1st. So just a reminder there, because it's a brand new policy, we actually have to update this flow diagram, but it will be incorporated in the new version. The next thing is that the individual will attend a 2-day Train the Trainer course. As many of you know, and I think many of the participants on this call, you guys have been attending some of our recent remote Train the Trainer courses, after which you will receive a certificate to indicate that they were a PSA trainer. So again, this is our flow chart that we have been using. When people attend the Train the Trainer course in person, it is a 2-day course normally. With the remote offerings, it has been lengthened to a 4-day course just because they're half days. We've been incorporating some additional interaction, things like that. So after the participant attends the Train the Trainer course, they become a PSA trainer. And with that certificate and that role, they are able to perform a couple of different responsibilities. The first one is delivering any of the curriculum modules under the supervision of a PSA lead trainer. They may register PSA grower training courses with AFTO as long as there is a PSA lead trainer present. And then, of course, PSA trainers can also, if they decide to, proceed with applying to be a PSA lead trainer. And it's really that process that we're going to go into in the next few slides. To briefly overview the lead trainer process, first, the trainer will fill out a supplemental application, including 4 short answer questions. And of course, as Gretchen mentioned, there is 1 short answer question per competency area. And then the trainer application and the supplemental application as a package will be reviewed and evaluated by the lead trainer review committee. And then a decision will be made whether the trainer is qualified or not to become a PSA lead trainer. So what I wanted to highlight in the next few slides were kind of suggestions and recommendations for anybody who is thinking about submitting their PSA lead trainer application, because we want people to be as successful as possible. And the first thing I wanted to share with you is this resource. We call it the lead trainer scoring document. And this is essentially a publicly available scoring document. And it really outlines the details on how lead trainer applications are scored. So I mentioned that each lead trainer application is really comprised of two different sections. There's the trainer application, which includes an educational background, teaching and training experience, and then the applicant's produce production, extension experience, handling experience. And that is all based on a point-based rubric. So in this lead trainer scoring document, we do not share the actual point-based rubric. However, we share examples of what we're looking for when it comes to somebody's educational background, for example. Maybe it's a number of classes on good agricultural practices, HACCP classes, things like that. And then, of course, when participants have taught at a PSA grower training course, there is room for adding that information into the teaching and training experience. And then the second part of this lead trainer scoring document is information on how the PSA supplemental application is reviewed. And when I say the supplemental application, I mean those 4 short answer questions. And one of the things that this scoring document includes is the rubric that we used for scoring the supplemental application. So each short answer question is going to be scored with a 1, a 2, or a 3. And I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on this because this information is all available in that scoring document. But if each response is scored with a 1, then that means that there's something in that response that is incorrect, that is not true, and that would potentially cause a grower to do something incorrect on their farm. So if one of the responses is scored with a 1, then that means that the application would be declined. 2 is needs further information. This is where the application might, it's on the right track. However, there is something else that the reviewers are looking for, some pertinent information that is not included. And then the last one is a 3. So if the responses are scored with a 3, that means yes, meets expectations. That's exactly what the rubric and the reviewers were looking for. Okay, so with that, I am going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to highlight some information on how you all can prepare for submitting your PSA lead trainer application. And I always like to mention that the supplemental application, especially those 4 short answer questions, they're really like an open book test. We're really not trying to hide anything from you. So our general recommendations are, once you receive your short answer questions, you can prepare in the following ways. You can review the modules. I highly recommend this, especially if you notice that one of your questions asks you about soil amendments, for example. I would highly recommend opening up module 3, reviewing what the module has to say in terms of produce safety rule requirements and recommendations. And then you can also go into the teaching notes, because we have a lot of information and additional resources in the teaching notes. A lot of the questions do ask specifically about the produce safety rule, because the grower training is a training on the FSMA produce safety rule. So that is also a nice resource to check, as well as additional resources that are provided in the PSA curriculum. And of course, those are all listed under the teaching notes. I also wanted to highlight that there is supporting information found on the FDA's FSMA produce safety rule website. So as many of you are familiar with that website, That's where guidance is posted. You can access the preamble to the produce safety rule in the codified language when you open that PDF. And those are all excellent additional supporting information routes. And then the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of recommendations for reviewing is we do have that trainer updates webinar series that Gretchen talked about, and that is available on the PSA website. So we have that currently in English. And then, as Gretchen mentioned, we are going to be launching the Spanish language version of that in July, especially for trainers who maybe they've taken a lot of time off between attending a Train the Trainer course and applying to be a lead trainer. I highly recommend that you check out the webinar series, but then also that trainer update section of the website. I tried to include a screenshot as much as I could on the slide here, but you see we do have an annual update webinar where we highlight revisions or updates to the rule, additional recommendations, and we highlight a number of recent updates to the rule. So that might be a great place if you feel like you might be a little bit out of the loop in terms of produce safety rule trainings. And then lastly, one of our big recommendations, and you can see this kind of popped up first on the screen, is teaching each of the PSA modules in order to become familiar with the material. And I think many of you would agree with us that one of the best ways of getting to know the information is by actually teaching it. So it is not a hard and fast requirement when you apply to become a lead trainer. It is not a specific requirement that you've had to teach all the modules. However, we highly, highly recommend it because it really is the best way to become familiar with the material. And all of that information gets added into that point-based rubric, especially in the teaching and training section of your application. Okay, so moving on, some additional suggestions for when you fill out your trainer application. I've noticed in working with different trainers, a lot of times people, especially now, and especially if they are a newer hire into produce safety or even into the agricultural kind of sector, I notice that a lot of people will attend a Train the Trainer course and then take some time to better attain more background and experience in produce safety before deciding to apply to become a lead trainer. And that's excellent. We recommend, like I said, teaching the modules and gaining that experience. So if people take off time between filling out the application initially before the Train the Trainer course and then submitting their 4 short answer questions in the supplemental application, there might be some additional experience that they want to add into that application. So I want to remind you that when you submit your supplemental application, we do have what I like to call the big white box. And this is a screenshot from the supplemental application website. And you can see there is a section to add additional teaching or training experience. This is a great place that you can add in any additional experience. Maybe you have been assisting growers with on-farm readiness reviews. Maybe you attended an on-farm readiness review training. Maybe you have been teaching at grower training courses. Any of those are great examples of the type of information that we're looking for to help supplement your application. In terms of completing the supplemental application, we have some additional recommendations for you. As I mentioned, there is no time limit for submitting your responses. I will get emails occasionally from people asking, saying, hey, it's been about 4 or 5 months since I've attended a Train the Trainer course. A, is it too late? Can I still submit my application to be a lead trainer? And B, I lost my link. So of course, there's no time limit for submitting your responses. And I just wanted to mention, if you do lose your link, you can feel free to email any of us at PSA, and we'll probably put you in contact with Michelle Humiston, and she will resend that link for you. So just wanted to mention that. I did mention it is like an open book test. So use your resources that I talked about before. And then each response is limited to 350 words. So we're looking for not an essay, but a relatively short response, something that you would tell a grower during a grower training course. And then lastly, in terms of recommendations for actually filling out the application, there is no save function in the website. So what I always recommend that people do is when they open up the link with their 4 short answer questions, they copy and paste those questions into a Word document. That way you can work on them separately. And then when you're ready to submit, you can paste them into the actual portal to submit them. I'm a person that I always like to work on things, walk away, come back the next day or come back later in the week and reread, make sure I haven't changed my mind or I don't have any edits. I highly recommend that you do that for the supplemental application as well. Okay, in order to kind of wrap up this discussion, I have a couple of recommendations for responding to these supplemental questions. For those of you who have potentially looked through their questions that they've received, you probably noticed that most of the questions that we have on the supplemental application are questions that growers actually ask during PSA grower training course. Again, this whole lead trainer process is to ensure that there has been a vetted lead trainer in the room at each grower training course so that growers are receiving the information that they need and information that is accurate. So we really do try to make those questions representative of the type of questions that we receive during trainings. A successful response will help demonstrate that the applicant is able to communicate both produce safety rule requirements as well as good agricultural practices recommendations. So in the grower training course, those are the musts and the shoulds. And again, in a way that a grower would understand. So as goes with that point, I want to recommend that you not copy straight from the PSA manual or other resources. I know all of us during grower training courses, I think we'll often bring our manual with us. It's really nice to say, okay, I'm going to read you the requirement in the rule, and then I'm going to interpret for you and your scenario what that means. So we do ask that you not copy straight from the manual, but you use your own words. And then again, it is important to remind you that this process is really in place to ensure an effective training to support growers. So with that, I know I just passed along a number of different recommendations really for submitting your PSA Lead Trainer application. A lot of these recommendations are summarized in this resource, and this one is relatively new. This is tips for developing a successful PSA Lead Trainer application. And we include recommendations for both the trainer application as well as the supplemental application. So filling out those 4 short answer questions. Now, if any of you are interested in some more information, I could easily spend an hour, but I want to give ample time to Billy and the panel to talk about some of their experiences. So I tried to keep it relatively brief, but I wanted to remind you that I shared a number of resources with you. If anybody has more questions about the actual lead trainer process, we did have a educators call back in May of 2018 where we went through some additional recommendations, some of the nuts and bolts of what we've seen in past lead trainer applications. So I do recommend that you check out that recorded webinar because that might be able to answer some of your questions. And then I also wanted to show you that resource, the PSA trainer flow diagram. I shared a screenshot of that diagram a few slides back, but that is another resource that I wanted to highlight. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Billy Mitchell, and he is going to introduce our panelists.
Great, thank you so much, Donna. I just learned a lot, and Rob, thank you for those links. So what we're going to do is introduce the panelists, allow them to talk a little bit about their role and their why they decided to become lead trainers. And then we do have some prepared questions for them, but I think you all know, both as trainers, lead trainers, one of the joys and challenges of being a trainer is getting questions from the audience. So please don't be shy. And if you have a question, put it in the chat box. And we'll make sure that we can get to as many as we can today. So I'm Billy Mitchell with the Local Food Safety Collaborative, and our three panelists are Elisabeth Hodgdon from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Barrett Vaughn from Tuskegee University, and Karen Ullman from Washington State Department of Agriculture. And we really tried to make sure that we got trainers from different parts of the country who work with all types of growers. So we're East Coast, West Coast, the South, urban growers, rural growers, large scale growers, small scale growers. So hopefully feel pretty confident these panelists will reflect at least a little bit of the work that you're doing out in the field. And so Elisabeth, we'll start with you. If you'll just say hi, your role, and then the why. Why did you decide to become a PSA lead trainer?
Thanks, Billy. My name is Elisabeth Hodgdon. I'm a regional vegetable specialist with Cornell Cooperative Extension's Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program. And our regional team covers the easternmost counties in New York, from Clinton County, where I'm located, up near the Canadian border, down to the Hudson Valley. And I became a lead trainer because it was a requirement of my position when I started in 2019. At the time, our team didn't have any lead trainers. And so whenever the team wanted to hold a PSA grower training course, they had to reach out to somebody from the PSA or, someone from outside the team. So as part of my position, I took over as the lead for food safety programming for the team. And when I became a lead trainer, that allowed us to really have, independence and leadership in order to offer those trainings. And so I should also explain that food safety isn't all that I do. So I'm a vegetable specialist, and I, split my time with doing research and extension programming related to vegetable production. And then I have food safety as part of my role as well, assisting all types of produce growers in our region. So fruit, vegetable, berries, etc.
Great, thank you. You stay very busy.
I do. I mean, that's one thing that I really love about my job, is that I get to work in so many different areas.
Great, thank you. And Barrett, if you want to go next, just who you are, what you do, and why you decided to become a lead trainer.
Certainly. Hello, my name is Barrett Vaughn. I'm an associate professor at Tuskegee University and also have an extension appointment. Why I became a lead trainer? Well, I saw that there was a real need. I think at one point in time, there was only one or perhaps two actual lead trainers in Alabama. I think it was Dr. Woods. Well, I'm not sure if she's on this morning or this afternoon. But one of the things is that a lot of the times when we were doing training, it wasn't really so much spur of the moment. It's just there was some need to sort of do things relatively quickly or arrange things relatively quickly. So sometimes if you have to call someone and try to get on their schedule and arrange for their travel and their lodging and everything else. So it just made sense for one of us on the team to really become a lead trainer. Since we've got quite a few trainers, I think we've got one other lead trainer who's at the institution or associated with us. And, when we're doing these trainings, we try to work together as much as possible. So it just worked out really well for the style and the clientele that we were working with.
Great, thank you, Barrett. That's a good point, that it really does provide you this flexibility, being a lead trainer, to be able to sometimes pull off grower trainings a little bit more quickly than if you had to coordinate a bunch of other schedules and timelines. And Karen, if you'll do the same, just tell us your role and why you decided to become a lead trainer.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Ullman. I work with the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I've been a resource person involved in agriculture statewide in Washington for about the last 8 years. And for the last 6 years or so, I've been focused on-farm produce safety, both GAP and FSMA education. And I actually attended I think it was the first PSA Train the Trainer in Portland, Oregon, probably one of the first on the West Coast, really early on, because I had already been doing some GAP, on-farm GAP and FSMA training workshops. And so I knew I wanted to become a Train the Trainer pretty early on in the process, because I knew, first off, my position at the agency was just in a good spot for trying to increase access of this training in our state. My position was pretty much 100% dedicated to the topic, and I had the event planning expertise, knowledge, where to host events, where farms are located, seasonal logistics and things like that. We already had a program, we knew how to do the outreach, we knew funding was coming down the pipeline and that was going to be a priority for our agency. And I knew the partnership landscape fairly well to know who to plug to make this all happen. So that was, I think my motivations for becoming a lead trainer were kind of two-part. One was that external motivation. And also too, there was a personal motivation, just kind of professional development wise. I saw it as an opportunity for also personal growth as well. I figured, heck, if I can get good at if I can get good, maybe even great at presenting and being a trainer, I just see that as a really widely applicable life skill. So that was part of my motivation as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that professional development is so big. You had mentioned GAP and FSMA a couple times, and becoming a lead trainer really helps you dial in on what the produce safety rule says versus, what might be in a third-party audit, which is so important for the growers. So Elisabeth, I think we'll pass the mic back over to you. And I would love to know, what is 1 or 2 or 3 of your suggestions for prospective lead trainers to prepare? If somebody said, give me your best tips, what would you share with them?
Yeah, I think I have 2 of them that I think are really important. So when I started off in my position, I was planning on taking about a year. I went through the Train the Trainer program, and my goal was to more or less say yes to any training invitations that people gave me. And so I wanted to get as much practice as possible teaching all the modules. I ended up teaching, I think, all but one of the modules before I had sent in my application to be a lead trainer. And so just, practice makes perfect. So taking as many opportunities as you can to train. And then my other tip is training with a diverse group of trainers and under different lead trainers. And I thought that was really useful for me. I was just counting in my head a few minutes ago. I think I had trained under 6 or 7 different lead trainers before submitting my lead trainer application. And doing that really, at each training I went to with different lead trainers, I observed how the lead trainer did their job and how they organized the course and responded to questions. And I was kind of taking mental notes as to what I thought went well and what things I would do differently. And I think just taking some time to reflect on how those different courses went really helped me think about how I would be a lead trainer.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it can be really fun and informative to watch, even the way people set up rooms. And Barrett, we'll go to you next, because I the first time I saw Barrett teach, I think it was just a produce safety class. I was with Maggie Kaiser, and we both were writing down all these turns of phrases that Barrett was using and the way he was connecting with the audience with the concepts. It's so nice to learn from other people. So Barrett, if you had a few pieces of advice for people preparing, what would you share with them?
I'm really flattered. Thanks a lot. Preparing for becoming a lead trainer, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend this, because it really wasn't something that I did deliberately. Just from my position and just from the connections that I had sort of in the industry and in this group, many of whom the people are in this room, I ended up going to a lot of trainers and participating in them. So either between going there and just taking farmers, or going there and doing one module or so, or just going there because somebody asked me to go, or driving someone. I just ended up going to a lot of them and really being able to observe different people's styles and how they approach the, especially, the water topic. I'm sure everyone can can probably can say that, you know, it's different people, ways that people did, but it's just really getting an idea of what goes on during the trainings and the different, you know, variations. I went, none of them were, you know, across the country anywhere, but I went to, you know, some in Florida and a couple in Alabama and a couple in Mississippi. And it just really gave me a breadth of idea of how people were really doing that and how people were managing it, how they were managing time, how they were, you know, really kind of managing space, how they were addressing different people. And, you know, you're going to have a certain minimum of clientele that are really not happy to be there, and they kind of want to make everybody else feel the same way too. And how the lead trainer really kind of handles, you know, someone asking a barrage different question, kind of say, you know, put it in a parking lot, or we can save it till after, or we can. So it's like a lot of different strategies, I think, that really contributed towards that.
Yeah, oh gosh, that's such a good point. You really got to know the information, and you got to really be able to help keep folks stay on time, manage expectations, work with relationships. And Karen, for you, the advice that you would share, the tips?
Yeah, I would hands down echo the comments about just listening to other presenters and picking up notes. I'm always writing down little like snippets of wisdom about how they word things or say certain things. But for this question, I was actually thinking a little bit more back to me being early in my career trying to apply for this application, knowing that I maybe didn't have the formal academic or research background as compared to maybe stacked against some of the other applicants at the time, coming from an extension or university position, for example. So what I said was, well, what can I focus on? And what I did is I really focused on knowing the rule. I remember being at my office in Seattle, printing out the full rule and actually reading it front to back. I remember getting kind of like a weird eye from my colleague, like, you know, you don't have to like fully read the whole thing back to back. But to me, that was the best way for me to kind of show my expertise in one facet that maybe others hadn't were afforded the bandwidth and time that I had to focus solely on that aspect. So when I came to my first Train the Trainer, I was pretty familiar with how I was interpreting. So it was really just trying to match was, you know, what other experts were saying, matching what I had interpreted. And that was like really a confidence booster because in a lot of cases I was asking kind of the right questions in my mind. I also, like when I was thinking about applying for the role, I was able to kind of pull on other experiences that I had. So I'd already mentioned that I'd been doing, you know, GAP on farm training. So I was able to like pull from my other experiences. I had even done like other on-farm environmental education. And, you know, even though it wasn't the same topic, I think you can think about other things to pull from your past experience. And then certainly, I guess the third point I would make is, you know, attending as many Train the Trainers with the staff that are involved in, you know, assessing these applications, expressing your interest that you're wanting to go through this process and really asking for feedback actively in those scenarios, letting them know that you're interested in the process. That was one approach I took to be actually presenting with as many PSA folks as possible early on.
I bet you're not the only one on this call that printed out the rule. And I know a lot of us have the little book with highlights and underlines and post-it notes.
Yeah, I actually used to, now that I think back, like a little bit of like my own personal, like, you know, street cred with farms was to actually bring the rule to my trainings and be like, I've read this whole thing, so that you don't have to, like you should, it's a good idea to really know it in depth, but I'm here to help be the liaison for you and to interpret and to summarize and make this as easy to understand as possible for your specific scenarios. And as I got more mature in my presentation of the topic, you know, I was actually even able to like hone in to specific growers or specific regions and such, and explain specifically, we want to call out this topic because I know you do this thing on your farm that would apply. So I think that's where it starts to come more full circle as I've been reflecting on my experience with the train the trainer role or lead trainer role.
Thank you. Yeah, and you had mentioned the PSA staff. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but they're so generous with their time and their feedback. And I've learned so much both from their feedback, but also how to give feedback. Now that I'm a lead trainer to the other trainers, it's so helpful to engage with them. So Elisabeth, I think I'll bring the mic back over to you. And in your experience as a lead trainer, are there any skills or knowledge that you wished you had or realized you needed once you started training as a lead trainer?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think one thing that I've thought of over the past couple of years is I wish I had had a little bit more of a stronger background in microbiology, and also having a background and more time to read the literature for food safety issues, because I feel like, you know, a few times at every training, growers will ask questions about, they'll phrase it something like, is there any evidence that, you know, there are pathogens and such, or is there any evidence that this happens? And so they really want to know about the evidence, the science behind it. And I think having more of I wish I had more of a background in, you know, having learned about that and read, you know, some of the literature beforehand. I think that was, yeah, one aspect that I think background that I wish I had.
Right. And so Barrett, you might have been thinking for an answer for that question, but we're bumping up on time. So I'm going to leave it just open for you. Either you can answer that question or just a final word of wisdom or thought about being a lead trainer or the lead trainer process that you'd like to share.
I guess the one thing that I would say, still kind of addressing the last question, is I wish I had had more production ag experience. I think it would have lent more to my credibility as a trainer and as a lead trainer. But the one thing that I did do is I tried to have as many actual producers that I could, you know, refer to when people would have questions and I had no clue what they were talking about, you know, where the rubber really kind of meets the road and they're using some lingo that I just did not recognize. Just making relationships with other, you know, producers that have gone through at least the grower training and kind of just relying on them.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's harder in the virtual environment, but I have learned that when I don't know something about farms, being a trainer, having those conversations with those farmers and building that relationship, I can go out and visit their farm, see what's going on. It's just really important. And so Karen, for you, please go ahead and you can answer that question of something you wish you knew, or just a final thought, something that's been on your mind.
Yeah, I think I'll just maybe add to the conversation. I think one indicator of you know, a successful lead trainer, maybe kind of an indicator to yourself as you're working through this process, is not just, you know, having a solid knowledge of the role and all in its various aspects, but really being that interpreter of the content. And when you're able to kind of weave together a story that's bringing together all of these concepts, I think that's one way of strongly relaying to growers challenging concepts in a way that can help to stick and help to make things memorable and hopefully to influence that behavioral change that we're looking for in like kind of a longer term scope.
Thank you. Yeah, being a lead trainer, I think, has helped me become a better storyteller about produce safety, just standing in front of so many crowds. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much to Elisabeth, Barrett, and Karen. And I will pass the mic over to Donna to wrap things up.
Thank you, Billy. So I was actually, before our panelists run, we do have a few minutes left until the top of the hour. So I did want to see if any of the attendees, either using the chat box, or I believe you can unmute yourselves. Do you have a question for the panelists? And Sorry,
that while they're thinking of questions, one of the things that I just took away from this brief conversation with the three of you was how different you all prepared for this role. And I think there's not necessarily one right way to go about it, because you're all going to come at it with some different expertise, right? But recognizing what your weaknesses are, you know, the field experience for Barrett or the scientific background for Elisabeth, acknowledging those things and really pursuing it and adding that to your inventory of skills is really what it's going to take to get you there. And if you're not sure what opportunities exist out there to help fill those knowledge gaps, let us know. We can connect you with people in your region, with resources that we're aware of, because we've been around for a while and definitely want you to be successful as lead trainers.
And I will highlight a couple of the comments I've seen come through the chat box that I think this discussion especially really highlights the value of a diverse training team. And then also talking a little bit about having some levity, a good sense of humor. I think reminding us all as trainers and lead trainers that, you know, it is a fairly dense, it is a very dense training, and having those examples that you guys have been mentioning, remembering that from the grower participant side of things, a lot of people are nervous coming into this because it's food safety. And I think the importance of breaking the ice, I wanted to highlight that comment in the chat box as well. So if there are no questions, I'll still leave that open. I'm going to share my screen again very briefly. And I just want to give a huge thank you to not only our panelists, who I think did a really great job of nailing some of the things we were wondering about, some of the questions we wanted to ask them, but I really wanted to thank the National Farmers Union Foundation Local Food Safety Collaborative. Billy is really the person who came to us with this idea on doing an educator's call. I know he had been receiving a lot of questions in his work with the Local Food Safety Collaborative about becoming a lead trainer. So a huge thank you for your help in suggesting and planning this webinar. But yes, really, we appreciate your assistance, and then also providing the closed captioning and all of the background. So thank you very much. And with that, I will leave you on this PSA website. You can see just a reminder that we will be sending out a notice of our upcoming Spanish language trainer refresher series. And with that, I'm going to see if there's any other questions. No questions. Well, just another big thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you guys do have any questions as you go down the path of becoming a lead trainer. We're happy to answer any questions about it.